this is some content that I'm so passionate about because I know how important it is to have solid relationships. Somebody told me when I was younger, when I was in high school, I don't remember if it was a motivational speaker, a teacher, mentor, I don't know who, but it stuck with me nevertheless. And they said, who you choose to marry will determine about 90% of your happiness in life. And I don't know why that stuck out to me. Obviously, I want to be happy in life, and it's just an area that I was never willing to settle on. I had all these limiting beliefs of I'm not good enough and I don't deserve success, but for whatever reason, those limiting beliefs did not control my relationships. I was not willing to settle on relationships, and I was only willing to even entertain the idea of getting into a relationship if it was, perfect. And for a long time in my life, I thought I'm probably setting the bar way too high. I had two girlfriends in my entire life. One lasted 3 days, and I married the second one. And many of you know Sybil, and we're celebrating our 15th anniversary here in a few weeks. That's part of the celebration that we'll be doing in Greece because she's going with me. And so I know that it's incredibly important to be fulfilled in your most intimate relationships, because when there's drama there, when there's disconnect, when there's just a lack of fulfillment in your internal relationships, nothing externally can really make up for that. And unfortunately, a lot of people try to make up for it with success or, whatever other kind of coping mechanisms they choose. But the reality is, fulfillment is hugely determined by your inner core of relationships. Now, that does not necessarily mean you have to be married to be fulfilled or to be happy or to make your life mean anything, but you've got to have solid inner circle relationships in order to, be happy, in my opinion. And so a lot of the things that I say now, this whole presentation is going to be romantic relationships because that's what I'm being brought out to Greece to talk about. But you can pull off some of these things, and a lot of it's going to apply to any connected relationship, whatsoever. But let's get into the content. And honestly, I'm just going to riff a little bit. I have no notes. I mean, I've got slides that I spent quite a bit of time on some of the transitions. I'm quite proud of myself and some of the things that you're about to see. I got, just the perfectionist came out. It's like, oh, what can I do with this? And I started to play, and I actually added some transitions about 8 minutes ago. Some things that I was just tinkering and toying with. But I want to just kind of go through the content and honestly just kind of see what comes out of me as I think about relationships. So here we are. Better Life Day. That's what this event in Greece is all about. There's 8 speakers coming in, and if I get the permission and if they are going to live stream it, then I will send out the live stream information to all of you so that you can watch. It's quite a time difference, so I don't know what that'll mean what that'll mean over here, but you can watch live, not only myself, but 7 other speakers really just talking about how to have a better life. The 6 steps to enrich your romantic relationships overnight, because I think a lot of these changes can absolutely happen very quickly. And let me give you a short background on how this content even came up. Sybil and I go to conferences all the time. And I think if you're serious about personal development and working on yourself, you must do that. You must constantly get yourself out of your normal environments, go to seminars, go to workshops, mingle with people who are on the same path as you and so forth. You just got to do that. I've never met anybody, honestly, who has made any sort of real significant wholesale changes in their life without doing something like drastic. I mean, going to seminars and hiring coaches and so forth. So anyway, Sybil and I are in that environment all the time, and we have an amazing relationship. I've never been mad at her once. We've never gotten into an argument once. We've been together 18 years. We'll be 15 years married on June 14th. And we've never been, I can't definitively say she's never been mad at me, but I can say I've never been mad at her. And I can say that we've never yelled at each other. For 15 years, we've got two kids, bankruptcy, running a business together. There's all kinds of things that we've been through, and things that for a lot of people would sort of light the fuse to some emotional bombs and fireworks and stuff. And it just never happened with us. And so we're getting asked all the time by people, especially the people that just saw us interact at seminars, over the course of 7 days. They would say, "What do you do?" I mean, Jack Canfield, many of you know Jack, and um, he's even made comments, in front of the seminar rooms, like, "Man, these guys talking about me and Sybil. I mean, these guys, they get it. Like that's what this work is about. It's about coming together as a couple, and most of them see us with our kids. And I'm not trying to toot my own horn here, but what I'm saying is that the work that Sybil and I have done on ourselves personally has absolutely transformed our relationship and our family. We are raising two children with the awareness that we just wish we had when we were little. And these kids are learning about how to change their head talk, and how to control their emotions, and why people do the things that they do, and so forth. So we've just really intentionally brought it into our family, and it's made a huge difference in everything. 7 years ago I would have said my relationship with Sybil couldn't have gotten better, because we were happy, we were in love, we didn't argue, we're passionate. And I didn't know the depths that I was missing out on until we started to do some of this work internally. And it's just brought our connection so much closer. And one of the challenges in personal development is when one person works on themselves and the other person doesn't. And that can be really tough. It feels like you're growing apart. So that's another thing that Sybil and I really want to talk about. So anyway, we kept getting this question, what do you guys do? And one day we sat down and we like, yeah, what do we do? And we didn't know, because we don't have any rules that we follow. It's not like we ever went to counseling or relationship seminars and we've got a set of rules to do this and don't do that. So we really had to tease it out of ourselves. We really had to ask, what is it that we actually do? And many of you heard Sybil did one of our expert calls a couple of years ago on this topic, how to enrich your romantic relationship. So anyway, that's how this whole thing has kind of come about. Sybil and I will do content around this. I don't know what it'll look like, if it'll look like seminars or writing a book or something like that, but we will do, we will teach some of this work, because it is incredibly important. And I'm passionate about empowering kids. And one of the best way to empower kids is to show them a clean, healthy marriage, clean, healthy relationships, because they tend to model what they see. So this is us. This is our content. Now, here's what I believe to be true. I think most relationships look like this. And I think, we've got this kind of standard emblem, I guess, or image rather, of two joined wedding bands, right? And we tend to think that that's what life is really about. That's what relationships are really about, is people that are really connected that way, and kind of joined, right? Joined together. And I understand the reasoning behind that, but when Sybil and I sat down to say, what do we actually do? And actually, let me give you a little bit more background on that. I'm gone quite a bit, and in 2007, I was gone all the time. And now Sybil's involved in certain trainings where she's gone for a week at a time, um, and we certainly miss each other, but it doesn't add to any drama or challenges in our relationship. Meaning that I can be away and she doesn't get jealous, and I don't get jealous, or I don't get worried about what she's doing. And we don't, lean on each other in a negative way. We don't have any of those just nasty judgments or things that we project onto each other. And what we realized is that this little image that you're looking at here is probably the reason that most people do all of that stuff. Get jealous and um, have these judgments and accuse people of doing certain things, it's because of this interlocking. And for many of you, you've probably seen the movie Jerry Maguire. It's a very famous movie out here in the States. And one of the lines, there's this moment here, the little picture that I got, where Jerry Maguire is trying to get his girlfriend back, Renee Zellweger, and he goes on this, this little soapbox for a minute or two, and one of his famous lines in there is "You complete me," and that's how he sort of got her back, right? Is he just said, "You complete me." And as much as that has become an iconic phrase and something that has sort of made its way into our romantic language, I think it's actually the problem. I think that most of the problems start when we search for somebody to complete us, right? So here's the way it looks. You've got a woman, you've got a man, and they're attracted to each other, so they form this relationship. And the overlap right there in the middle is, I think, where all the problems come in, right? Because that becomes basically what their relationship is. The relationship is really formed inside the overlap there. So I have a question here from Jenny. She says, does Sean have kids? Yes, I have two kids. I have an 11-year-old daughter who's going into middle school next year and a 7-year-old son. So they are getting a lot of this, internal personal development work that that we're doing on each other. So anyway, back to the relationships here. I think this is where the relationship really lies, and it's in the overlap that most of the problems occur, right? That's where the irritations are. That's where a lot of the arguments stem from. That's where the accusations are made. That's where we've got expectations. That's where we've got resentments, because we're expecting the other person to complete us. And when you expect somebody else to make you happy, that's not a good scenario, because your happiness is your responsibility. Now, I'm not saying that relationships can't amplify your happiness, because they absolutely can. But another person's job is not to make you happy. So when we put that responsibility on somebody else to make us happy, then naturally there are expectations that get laid. We expect them to do certain things. We expect them to know how we feel. We expect them to know what we want. We expect them to sacrifice. We expect. And that's what leads to the irritations. That's what leads to the resentments. That's what leads to the accusations. That's what leads to the judgments that don't serve us. I mean, I believe that that's what leads to all of the problems, is that overlap right there. Because if you take that relationship away and then you pull each person apart, what you have is two incomplete people. And that's dangerous. First of all, you're not incomplete. That's a dangerous story to be telling yourself in the first place, that you as a person are incomplete and you need somebody else to fill in that little bite right there. It looks like somebody took a bite out of you. And what happens is, in a relationship, especially if we've been in a relationship in the past and we've gotten hurt, that's exactly what a lot of us feel like right there. It feels like somebody took a piece of us with them. And now we're trying to find somebody else who will give that piece back to us, or who will have that exact same piece. And that's just setting us up to fail. I mean, that's setting our relationship. It's not fair to you. It's not fair to your partner. And again, ultimately, you're lying to yourself that you are incomplete. So if you don't have a hole to fill, then you won't be looking for somebody else that has your missing piece. And one of the reasons why that's so dangerous is because a lot of times the people that have what you perceive to be the missing piece don't have a lot of the other things that are really important to you in a relationship. So, for instance, let's say you were in an abusive relationship. What happens a lot of times is in the very next relationship, people will decide to go find somebody who won't abuse them. So that piece is there called non-abuse. But a lot of times people, several years into the relationship, they realize, I actually don't like this person, right? I don't love this person, or I'm not even physically attracted to this person. He or she doesn't abuse me, but I actually don't like them. And that might sound really far fetched, but I've heard it time and time and time again in dealing with people who've had broken relationships in the past, especially abusive relationships. So we tend to go looking for that missing piece, or looking for the piece that's not there, like in this case, the abuse that's not there. But we're not clear on what it is that we do want. Not only are we not clear that we are whole and complete, we're not clear on what that circle looks like in the other person, because we want somebody who's also whole and complete, for it to be a healthy relationship, right? Or another example is maybe you feel like you don't have a lot of humor in your life, so you'll find somebody that can bring humor into your life, and you might feel like that piece is now fulfilled. But maybe their humor is a way to mask all kinds of deep personal pain, and they're not emotionally available. So you got the humor, but now you don't have the emotional connection that is actually more important than the humor. So this is what's happening a lot of times when people are searching for that missing piece, the missing piece that they have, and they're searching for somebody else that fits their missing piece. I just think it's dangerous. So I think instead of this overlapping relationship, I think an enriched relationship looks like this, where each person is whole and complete as is, and you just touch. You don't overlap, you just touch. So on the left there, that's Sybil in my relationship. Sybil is whole and complete without me, and I am whole and complete without her. And that's why we're so connected. And I know that's counterintuitive to the way that we're generally taught, or the way that we might think it has to be. We've got to have this interlockingness in order to have this strong unit. And I believe it's the exact opposite. I believe that the more whole and complete we are without the other person, the more connected we can be. Because look, if my circle is complete, I have more to give her. I'm not missing that big chunk. And if her circle is whole and complete, she has more to give me. And if you just take a look at, how much area is actually in here, you have two full, complete circles. Whereas before, you don't have two full and complete circles here. You've got, I don't know, maybe a circle and a half, if that, maybe a circle and a third, something like that. Yeah, probably about a circle and a half. Wouldn't you rather have two full circles of richness, of joy, of love, of happiness? So instead of this idea of finding somebody that completes you, I wish Tom Cruise would have said, "You complement me." So I don't think you need somebody to complete you. I think you need somebody to complement you. And as much as that might sound or feel like I'm splitting hairs, I'm telling you, I think this is the biggest piece in relationships. And what that means is your circle must be complete. So you've got to do the work on yourself. Sybil and I attribute a lot of our connectedness in our relationship to the times that we were both individually and separately, crying, going through these big ahas, and understanding where our limiting beliefs are, and understanding where the pains are and what needs to be healed inside of us. So instead of us expecting the other person to do that, we healed our own wounds. And when you heal your own wounds and you can show up more fully present and just more full in your relationship, everything is so much easier. And I'll tell you, the the disagreements that you have, because Sybil and I absolutely disagree on a lot of things. But disagreement with this model right here, when we're only touching each other, is way different than disagreement right here when we're overlapping on each other. Because a lot of times those kinds of disagreements get totally irrational really quick because of all those other things I've been talking about, the expectations, the irritations, accusations, all the Asians, right? Um, having a disagreement like this, when we're just talking about two people that complement each other, is amazing. And every time Sybil and I have a disagreement and we discuss it, and we don't blame each other, and we don't project onto each other, and we take full responsibility. Our disagreements sound like this: when this happens, this is how I feel, this is my judgment that I make, and this is what I would really request of you. And that's a whole different kind of discussion than you make me feel bad, or you don't trust me, or you don't respect me. We just don't do that. And the reason we don't do that is because of this model right here. Because we take full responsibility for our own fullness. We take full responsibility for our own completeness. And there are times when feelings get hurt, absolutely, but it doesn't cross the line. Let me take a couple comments or questions here. Bridget says, love this. You're so on. Cool. Thanks, Bridget. Another question from Kimberly says, what happens when you've already married someone who is not whole and complete? That means that you found yourself a human, Kimberly. And, not that we will all be completely done with our work, but I think wherever you are, and I'm just talking to you specifically personally right now, wherever you are whole and complete. I don't have a slide for this. If I would have thought of this beforehand, I would have. But even if, let me go back here a little bit. Even if we take the slide where the two people are, they seem like got a chunk out of them. If I would have thought of this beforehand, I would have gone ahead and drawn a border around that piece and said, you know what, even if this is what your shape looks like, you're still whole and complete as that shape. And now you just want to increase that wholeness and increase that completeness. So I think it's about embracing where you are, embracing everything that's happened to you in your life, and just deciding that you are whole and complete and there's work to do. So that's not, I'm not saying that you are pretending that you don't have pains and pretending that you don't have wounds, but I'm saying that you can just take inventory and say, you know what, I'm whole and complete right now, and I've got to do more work on myself to increase my wholeness and to increase my completeness. So I think that's the first thing for you, is to own your own wholeness and completeness. Now, if you've married somebody who doesn't seem like they are whole and complete, and I'll tell you, most men probably are not, because we're programmed to hide all of our pains. We're programmed to run from all emotions. We're programmed to not let anybody know that we have vulnerability and weakness and all that stuff. So what that means is most men are running around with deep secrets from themselves. Sometimes they show up as, they're trying to keep secrets from others, but most men are trying to keep secrets from themselves, called I'm human, and I have pain, and I have vulnerability, and I have fear. So men are programmed to shove that stuff down, to sweep it under the rug and not let anybody know about it. And what that means is a lot of men, most men in my experience, are walking around with these wounds that they're trying to make up for. And a lot of times they try to make up for it from an ego perspective. They try to make up for it from a macho, how can I control, how can I be strong perspective. And that's the exact opposite of what they need to do. But that's the way that we're programmed as men. So for you, I think the best you can do, and obviously, I can't give you relationship advice without knowing a lot more, but I think you can hold the space for him to do this work on himself, whatever that means. Sometimes it means just you doing work on yourself and sharing that with him, but not lecturing him, not telling him that he needs to go do this work as well. But holding that space open for him to embrace himself. And if you know that he's really having a hard time embracing himself, let's say, then you can work that into your conversations. You can try to make sure that he knows that you feel he's whole and complete as is, and you're there to support him and, whatever this transformation is for him and so forth. And I mean, there's so many variables here, obviously, with any kind of relationship, but at a real chunked up level, I think you can do that and hold that space open for him. On another end of the spectrum, it might be there might be a point in time where you have to ask yourself, is this relationship serving both of you anymore? And I'm not, this Pollyanna guy who thinks that all relationships are good relationships. I mean, I was a probation officer for a while, and I think a lot of the things that led a lot of the kids that I saw into crime was turmoil in the home. And I myself had a pretty tumultuous upbringing with my parents at each other's throat all the time. And they didn't split up until I was 18 years old. And I wish they would have done it when I was 8. It would have saved my sister and I a lot of heartache and a lot of yelling and a lot of screaming and all that sort of stuff. So that's just my personal opinion, that I don't think all relationships need to stand the test of time. I think people can grow, especially the longer you go in a relationship. So um, that's just me. I'm not that guy that says you have to stay in, stick it out no matter what. If you do believe that, just at a big chunked up level, that's just one of your beliefs that all relationships should last, then that's great. You can fight for it. Or if you just believe that you want to fight for your relationship, then that's great too. Um, and if you know that you're in it for the bigger game and you are going to fight for it, then it'll take a lot of the energy off of some of the other challenges, some of the other shortcomings that the other person might have and so forth, right? So that's my take on that. And again, that could be a longer, 2-hour answer with all the different variables. But, and I know you said accepting yourself as is, but wanting to be better. Yes, that's it. Accepting yourself as is. Because if you don't accept yourself as is, you can't get better. We can't change anything that we haven't first embraced. And I think most of us are not embracing who we are because we want to be better. But in reality, we have to embrace who we are so that we can get better. So yeah, that's exactly what I'm talking about. All right, let me get back into the content here. Let's see where I was. So I wish Tom Cruise would have said, "You compliment me." And so you got to remember that you're whole and complete as you are. Now here's the beauty of this. When you two are whole and complete as you are, here's where your relationship fits in. Your relationship is like a third entity. And again, there's no overlap between either one of you and your relationship either. And this circle is bigger because I believe that your relationship can be much more rich and more fulfilling without all of those irritations and accusations and frustrations and judgments and pain and expectations and all that stuff. Your relationship has so much more inside of it. But when we have all that negativity, it really poisons a lot of the positiveness that we can put into our relationship. So we are stunting, the growth basically. But when you're clean, you're whole and complete, your relationship can be whole and complete on its own. And this all came to Sybil and I after, talking about it for 20 minutes or 30 minutes. And then we thought, this is really cool because if you notice what this actually looks like, Sybil's a huge Disney fan. So it actually looks like Mickey Mouse, right? Kind of looks like Mickey Mouse. And so we sort of call this the Mickey Mouse model of marriage because this is the model that will make everything so much cleaner in your life, I promise. And Mickey's always happy, right? this will lead to much more happiness and joy in your world. And so it's really about you becoming more complete with yourself. So that's the overall concept. But now I do want to give you 6 steps, and Enrich becomes an acronym here that you can see. And these are sort of the how to's, some of the things you can actually implement and make some changes in your communication or the way that you think about, your relationship or talk to each other or what have you. So the first E, or the only E, the first letter, the E stands for, I just realized that I don't have notes and I have fill in the blank. So hopefully I remember what this content is. The E is to eliminate. Oh, I have them filled in here. Oh, great. Whew. Sorry, I'm such a dork. Eliminate your expectations. A lot of times I just leave them blank and I tell people what to write, but I forgot I did actually put them in here. Um, eliminate your expectations. Now, many of this is one of the concepts that I teach in general, that all irritations and all frustrations and all disappointment come from unmet expectations. So if you are unsatisfied in your relationship, I can guarantee you that you have, well, let me rephrase that. You can be unsatisfied without all this other negativity stuff. But if you are disappointed, if you are irritated, if you have any negative energy in your relationship, it is because you have an expectation that's not getting met. So if you say, well, my husband doesn't buy me flowers, well, you have an expectation that husbands are supposed to buy you flowers. And if you didn't have that expectation, the fact that he doesn't buy you flowers wouldn't upset you because he's not violating any of your rules, right? Because our expectations become rules that the other people, I would say most of the time, don't even know about, or that rule is just not as important to them for all kinds of other reasons. And then it's easy to get hung up on, well, it should be important to them, and this is just common courtesy, and this is the way relationships work, and blah, blah, blah. None of that serves you. Fighting for the rules of what's right and wrong doesn't serve you. Now, if that's something that you're going to fight for, that one of the things that's important in your relationship is for somebody to do something, then you might have to entertain the idea that this person that you've chosen just might not be the one that's going to compliment you then, because your values are not matched. I don't have time to get into it in this presentation, but one of the most powerful things you can do as a couple is to do values work. I know many of you on the line here, you've been through the values work. And when you do values as a couple and you realize what's truly important to each one of you separately and individually, and what's important to each one of you in a relationship perspective, from a relationship perspective, then all kinds of things get illuminated. You might realize that the things that are important to you just aren't important to them. Or you might realize that you both have the same things that are important to you, but the definition of those things are different. Like, for instance, there's a comedian that talks about relationships, and he said when they do studies on some of the highest values in relationships, humor is important to both men and women. However, what humor means to men and women differ. So for men, well, let me start with the women. For women, what humor really usually means is he can make me laugh. For men, what humor usually means is she laughs at my jokes. So that can be incredibly different, but the same value is there, but it's different, right? Or for men, the woman needs to have a sense of humor. A lot of times those two things are obviously kind of go hand in hand, because her sense of humor means that she'll laugh at my jokes. But so sometimes the value is the same, but the definition of the value or how it's applied isn't the same, right? So anyway, when you clear your own holes and wounds like I've been talking about, then you won't have the expectations for other people to do things for you and to make you happy. And that's gigantic. One of the things that I think is really important is that you don't expect your partner to fill all of your needs. I love the story that Jack Canfield told one time. This was such a huge aha for me. He said in a small group that I was a part of, he said that his wife just doesn't care about this about a lot of the stuff that he does. He's like, she hasn't even read most of my books. Jack's written like 65, 70 books, and his wife doesn't even read them because she doesn't care. And for a long time, he was making her wrong for that, that she should support him and she should care about this transformational work and all this kind of stuff. And then he realized that by him expecting her to be somebody she wasn't serving anybody. It wasn't helping their relationship. It was causing him to take a look at all the other areas that she was deficient, right? And so he realized this was a need that he had that his wife wasn't responsible for filling. And if it was a need that he had, he's responsible for filling it. So he went out and started this transformational leadership council that now has over 100 people that get together, twice a year and talk about this stuff that his wife didn't care about talking about. So now his need gets fulfilled. He released the expectation of her having to do that, and their marriage is better. And that was so huge when I heard that. And so I thought, what are some of the needs that I'm expecting Sybil to fill? And I share this obviously a lot of times with people who are going through relationship issues, but that's gigantic. What are the needs that you have? And if your partner's not filling them, that's not their responsibility. That's your responsibility. And sometimes that's going to be a deal breaking responsibility, right? Or need, rather. That's going to be a deal breaking need. If they're not interested in that, then you need to take a look at, is this a relationship that's going to serve you? Next piece here, well, it's underneath this. This will really help in getting rid of your expectations, is to learn your partner's love language. I know many of you have heard of a book called The Five Love Languages by Dr. Gary Chapman. I would highly suggest you read that book. It's incredibly illuminating. And it talks about how we basically have 5 different love languages. And most of the time, people are attracted to somebody else with a different love language. It's just that old uh, idea that opposites attract. It's actually quite rare that people marry somebody with the same love language. I mean, first of all, there's 5 of them, so it doesn't go exactly. It's not like 20% of the people have each one of these love languages, but inherently, most people don't have the love language that you have. So, I mean, just by pure percentages, you're probably going to get with somebody who has a different love language. And when you have that awareness that what they think love is different than what you think love is, and what they want to feel loved or to feel appreciated is different than what you want to feel loved and appreciated, it's gigantic. So back to this idea of having, your husband buy you flowers, that is, I think it's called gifts. To be honest, I don't remember each 5 of the love languages. I know acts of service is one of them. Personal touch is one of them. Quality time is one of them. I think gifts is another one, or I don't know if that's the exact wording, but um, so if somebody needs to get a gift to feel appreciated, but somebody else needs physical touch to feel appreciated, that's going to be challenging unless you understand what your partner really wants. So instead of me trying to explain all of these love languages, just get the book. Get it on audiobook or just go buy it, or go to his website. I think it's just called the5lovelanguages.com or something like that. It'll be easy to find. But it's The 5 Love Languages by Dr. Gary Chapman. I think it'll add so much to your awareness and understanding of the other person. And in doing that, the expectations will fall away just naturally. A lot of that stuff you don't have to work on when you work on yourself. The N in enrich your relationship stands for nurture the needs of the other person. As much as I just said that their needs or your needs are not theirs to fill, and their needs are not yours to fill, that also doesn't mean to not pay attention to them. You know, it's not your responsibility to do it, but it's a damn good idea, right? So if you know that they have physical touch, let's say, as a need to feel appreciated, then you might need to go out of your way to give them that physical touch. And that doesn't necessarily mean passion or a lot of sex or any of that. It sometimes just means like a touch on the shoulder while you talk to them, or it could mean no words whatsoever and just walking up behind them and just rubbing their back for stroke their back for a couple seconds. I mean, that's huge. It's huge to me because my love language is physical touch. It's huge to me. So it's not Sybil's responsibility to do that, but because she knows that's my physical touch, she does that more. And her love language is acts of service. And so, one of the things that I've been doing quite often recently, and she'll attest to this, is like washing the dishes. And I know that doesn't seem like a huge deal. I never thought it was a big deal because I don't care. Acts of service don't mean love to me. So it doesn't, if Sybil doesn't do things for me, I don't think she doesn't love me. Now, she doesn't consciously think I don't love her, but it kind of, the appreciation takes a hit a little bit when I'm not doing things for her. I'm not helping her with some of the chores and stuff like that. And it wasn't until recently that I realized how important that is to her. And so now I've been doing the dishes a lot. And I'll tell you what, doing the dishes is one of my top 5 most hated things on the planet. I absolutely hate doing the dishes for the sake of doing the dishes. But I don't mind doing the dishes when I know that it's an act of service for Sybil. So it takes a lot of that energy off, and we just stay connected more, and she appreciates it more, right? It's just a lot cleaner. So I'm not saying you're responsible for their needs, but get to know them and do what you can to nurture them. Another piece here, and this is gigantic. Now, the first one, plan time together, that's pretty self-explanatory. I think a lot of couples know, especially when you have kids, that one of the first things that goes is your quality time together. And that really starts to drain the connection. When you stop going to the movies, when you stop playing golf, when you stop just hanging out, when you stop talking to each other because you've got all these other responsibilities, and it's easy to lose the passion. It's easy to lose connection. It's easy to lose, you know, just keeping up with each other, knowing what each other wants and all that stuff. It's easy for all that stuff to go away, especially when children are in the mix. So you've got to fight for that. You really have to make that a priority. And one of the things that's really important is for you to still go on dates. Go on dates with each other, and go on dates with your children. Go on dates with your kids individually. If you have more than one child, it's important to spend time with each child individually, because each child really needs to know that they are important individually. So plan dates where you can just give quality time to each individual person within your family, or whoever you want to maintain a connection with. Intentionally do that. Put it in your calendar. Create a date time. Make it important to do that. And one of the people that you really have to spend quality time with is yourself also. So plan time apart. Allow each other to go off and do the things that are important to each one of them individually. I hear a lot of wives get irritated because their husbands want to go out and play poker, and poker is so stupid, and why do they just want to go out and just play with the boys, and we have so many things to do around the house and all this stuff. Well, it's important because it's important. Because he was probably playing poker before he ever met you. And because that's just a guy thing to do. And it's important. And I hear men getting all irritated for different reasons, but same concept of their wives. They just want to go off and play bunco and bingo, and why they got to do this stuff. It's so stupid. We have things to do around here. Why don't you get to work? Well, it's important because it's important. That's why. And it's really critical that we allow people to do the things that will make them happy. If you go back to that model of each person being whole and complete, if you don't allow your partner to do the things that will increase their wholeness and completeness, then you're sabotaging your own relationship, and you're kind of stunting their growth or evolution or happiness, So there are certain things that people just like to do. Let them like to do those, because the whole relationship will benefit. I promise you. So intentionally nurture everybody's needs as much as you possibly can. All right, the next piece here, the R stands for respect and responsibility. Now, respect is a big hot button to me. I think too many people's lives are controlled by their idea of what respect is. And most people can't clearly define what respect is without using respect in the definition. It's like you just respect people's, you know, needs, or you just have common courtesy. Respect is an opinion. I've never seen a definition of respect, or even more than that, a connotation of respect that is universally acceptable, meaning that what one person thinks respect is does not necessarily equal the same thing that another person thinks respect is. Respect is incredibly vague, but people have so much negative energy on it. So when people think they're being disrespected, the worst comes out of them. That's when so much of the anger comes out, the pain. We project things onto other people, and it's all about disrespect way too often. So I would suggest actually that you take the word respect out of your language. I mean, especially the way that we generally hold on to it. Like, you don't respect me. There's just not a lot to hold to. There's not a lot to do with that. It's just too vague. And so often our arguments come down to these vague concepts that not only do the two people not agree with, the two of them don't even understand at the same level what the other person thinks that word means. So that's not the kind of respect that I'm talking about. Respect them as a human being. I'm talking about respect their, yeah, everything that we've already gone through, basically. Respect the idea that they have a love language that's probably different than yours. Respect the fact that they have a love language. For me, respect is almost like embracing it, accepting it. Embrace the idea, respect the fact, because it's a fact that their love language is probably different than yours. Respect the fact that they do have these pains or wounds that they might be trying to make up for. Respect the fact that they want what it is they want. Just respect and embrace everything that's there. And when you do that, and then you take ownership and responsibility, which I've already alluded to, obviously these things kind of interweave a little bit. When you take that responsibility, everything is so much cleaner. A lot of people think that relationships are 50-50. I'm 50% responsible, you're 50% responsible in our relationship. And I disagree. I think responsibility in relationship is 100-100. You have 100% responsibility for your happiness, for your part in this relationship. And I have 100% responsibility for my happiness, my completeness, my part in this relationship. And when we're both 100% responsible for our own experiences, oh man, it's a different world. It's a totally different world. And everything becomes cleaner. Now, we have this golden rule out there that says treat others the way you want to be treated. And I get that. You want to treat other people with gentleness and uh, respect is part of that, obviously. But what I like is not to treat others the way you want to be treated, but to treat others the way they want to be treated. And in a relationship, I don't want you to think about these as sacrifices. I don't see me washing the dishes as a sacrifice. I see me washing the dishes as respecting Sybil's love language and helping. It's more of a contribution. I'm contributing, I'm not sacrificing. I'm contributing to the wholeness of our marriage and our relationship. I'm not sacrificing something that I really hate doing or something that I really want to do instead in order for me to fulfill something that Sybil wants. Because when you think of the things that you do for the other person as a sacrifice, boy, that's only a half a step away from resentment. Because we tend to resent other people for the sacrifices that we have to make on behalf of them. So it's important that you hold on to it in a different way, that this isn't a sacrifice, it's just a contribution. You're contributing to the wholeness and the happiness of the marriage or the relationship and your own happiness just by doing certain things, maybe a little bit differently than you would have done them otherwise. But you've got to understand the way that other people want to be treated and move that way as much as you can. That doesn't mean you have to change everything about you and bow down and do everything that they want you to do. Absolutely not. I am not that guy either. I don't think you need to transform into the person that the other one expects you to be, because I think at that point that that's probably a deal breaker, right? I don't think you should ever change who you are in order to fit into somebody else's ideals, in order to fit into somebody else's expectations, because I think nobody wins there. Why would you change yourself, who you truly are at a core level, to make somebody else happy? Because now you're not yourself, which means you're inherently unfulfilled, and you can't be happy in life if you're changing who you truly are. And they're not getting who you are anyway. So even if this different you is pleasing them, they're not getting the best of you or the most of you. So I think everybody loses in that situation. So that's not what I'm saying. Become the person that the other person wants you to be, but you can just make contributions. And the connotation of that is so much different. The I, this is a big one. Importance is imperative. Many of you have seen that idea that everybody's walking around with a sign on their neck or a sign on their forehead. I've heard it several different ways, but everybody's walking around wanting to feel important. And I think it's one of the most critical issues in broken relationships is that one person or each person doesn't feel important. This just gave me an idea. Going back to the responsibility piece on the last slide, what happens a lot of times in relationships is that we start noticing, the deficiencies of the other person. We start noticing what they're not doing anymore. They're not taking out the trash. In my case, I wasn't doing the dishes. It's easy to look at the things that the other person's not doing. And I would say probably 95% of the time, if you ask yourself a question that's internal, meaning how am I not doing that also, you'll usually get a huge aha. So for instance, there's times in our marriage where I will be noticing that Sybil's not appreciating me. She's not saying the things that I'm expecting her to say. She's not telling me I appreciate you for working so hard, and she's not doing all this stuff. And of course, if that's my thought that she's not doing this, then I'll look for where she's not doing this. And I'll miss all the things that she is doing because I'm, at an unconscious level, I'm searching for all the deficiencies. So even when she does appreciate me, it rolls right off because I've got a story in my head called She's Not Appreciative of Me. And what I've found is that every time, if I stop that story, it's always a ridiculous story. If I stop it and I ask myself, am I appreciating her? The answer is always no. Always. So whatever it is that we're looking for the other person to do, I would say at least 9 times out of 10, we've stopped doing that ourselves also. So the answer is not try to find a way for them to appreciate you. The answer is you appreciate them. If you feel like you're not important, the answer is not to expect the other person to make you feel important. The answer is to you make them feel important. And I guarantee you, it's like you can infuse that energy as well. If you go back to that model of the 3 different circles, the Mickey Mouse model, if you feel like appreciation is not in that bigger circle of your relationship, you put it in there. Don't expect and wait for the other person to put it in there, but that's what we usually do. We get our feelings hurt, we make them the bad guy, and we have this story called They're Not Doing This. You put it in. If that's an ingredient that's missing, then you be the bigger person and you put it in. And I can tell you almost all the time, when you put it in, you will experience more of it. You'll notice that a lot of it was there in the first place and you just weren't noticing it. But by you throwing into the circle what it is that you want to experience that's important to you in your relationship, they will usually do the same. But it's really important that you don't do it with that expectation. Don't make somebody else feel important so that they will make you feel important, because that's not clean. That's not a clean contribution. That's doing something and expecting somebody else to reciprocate. And that's always a lose-lose battle, because usually when they reciprocate, it's not good enough, it's not the way you wanted it to be, or it's only because you did it first and you don't accept it as being genuine. So if something's missing in your relationship, you be the one that puts it in there. And I guarantee you it changes the game. So importance here, and that's a related point that I was just talking about. And I want to give you 5 ingredients of importance. These are 5 things that we all are wanting. And these 5 things are what we wanted as children. I think these are things that all kids want, and we're all still big kids now anyway. So these are the 5 pieces that I think make up importance. And so my suggestion is that you add these ingredients into your relationship as much as you can. Acknowledgement is one of them. Just simply acknowledge. You know, Sybil and I are so much better at that now, where we're just saying, "Hey, thanks. Thanks for all you do. Thanks for my thanks to her is thanks for getting the kids to school all the time, and thanks for being such a good mom to them, and thanks for making sure they have lunches. Thanks for those things that you do." And quite often she takes those things for granted that she does, and I take those things for granted, and it just starts to fester when those things are taken for granted. So I acknowledge that, and she acknowledges me. Thanks for doing all the work. Thanks for doing the dishes. Thanks for doing a lot of the responsibilities when I was doing this fundraiser stuff, and it goes a long way. So these acknowledgments don't have to be earth breaking. They don't have to be, you don't have to wait for somebody to win a Nobel Prize to acknowledge them. It could just be acknowledgement for showing up in the relationship. Thank you for, I just want to acknowledge you for having the guts to tell me what was on your mind, and I know that wasn't easy to do, and I know it led to an argument, or I know it led to a communication, a painful communication or whatever, but I just want to acknowledge you for doing that. Everybody has things that can be acknowledged. So the more you acknowledge somebody, the more fulfilled that they will feel. Another one is affection, especially in romantic relationships. Obviously, just show affection. Now, affection might be different for different people, but that's really important. In romantic relationships, people really want to feel desirable. People want to feel wanted. And one of the ways to make people feel wanted is by showing your affection. And again, the longer the relationship goes, um, the easier it is for this piece to go away, because you don't have that, the lust a lot of times anymore that you did in the very beginning. And you don't have the time when there's kids involved, and there's businesses, and there's all kinds of other responsibilities, and there's houses and things like that. A lot of times, just not time. But you've got to make time. That's a flame that you cannot afford to let burn out. You've got to continue to fan that flame of affection, and it's quality over quantity. It's not, you don't have to spend a lot of time there, but you've got to spend some effort there. The third A is appreciation. And acknowledgement and appreciation aren't necessarily the same thing. You can do them simultaneously. A lot of times you can acknowledge and appreciate somebody at the same time. But, acknowledgement is just almost neutral sometimes. Hey, I noticed that you did the dishes. Thank you for that. I just want to acknowledge that I noticed that, right? Appreciation is where you appreciate the person. So it might look like, um, I acknowledge that you did the dishes, and I really appreciate you for stepping up and taking on more responsibility when I'm away. So that's kind of a combination of acknowledgement versus appreciation. So they are different. Appreciation is more of the heart and you appreciating the person, but acknowledgement is more a little bit neutral. They're both important. Acceptance, huge. We've talked about that in some of the questions I've answered already. Got to accept who they are, accept who you are, accept the relationship for where it is. If your relationship is not where you want it to be, the very first step is to accept that it's exactly where it is right now. If you've hurt each other's feelings, you've got to accept the fact that that's just a part of your relationship. Because pretending that it's not there won't make it go away. Pretending that things are not there is never a good strategy. If something's there, the best strategy is to accept that it's there. Now, accept does not mean resignation. That doesn't mean don't do anything about it. But you can't do anything about it until you first accept the existence of it. So I accept the fact that we've got pain in our relationship in the past, and I want to fix that. I accept the fact that you cheated on me, or I cheated on you, or I accept the fact that I had thoughts of leaving. Listen, if that's reality, own it. Accept it first, then change it. Now, you can't change things that happened, but you can change the way you're holding on to the things that happen. You can change the way that you focus. You can change what you decide is more important than any of the things that have happened in the past, right? So, but you can't do any of that without fully accepting it. As soon as you fully embrace and accept everything that is, it has almost no power on you. At the very least, it has less power on you. And then the last thing is attention. People are craving for attention, and nowadays when we have smartphones and we have all this the emails, we've got so much distraction. What happens is a lot of times people don't feel important because one of their partner's not paying attention to them. So go out of your way to pay attention to your partner. All right, the C in Enrich stands for conscious conversations. And what that means is sometimes you have to talk about things that are bubbling below the surface. You've got to talk about your irritations. You've got to talk about your judgments. You've got to talk about the things that need to be talked about. Because if those conversations are not talked about, then they're just going to fester below the surface, right? And that's never a good situation. So a lot of times people want to avoid those critical, crucial, and I want to say conscious conversations, because I think it is a step of consciousness to have those conversations. A lot of times people want to avoid that because they feel like it's going to be painful, but it's much less painful than dealing with the pain that's already in the marriage or the relationship because the conversation are not being had. Quite often the things that the other person wants, you don't know about because you haven't asked them what they want. You think you know what they want, but you haven't asked, especially in longer relationships. Take the time to have those conversations. Be willing to own your role in all of your upsets because all your upsets are yours. But have those conversations. Every time Sybil and I have one of these conscious conversations, sometimes they last 2 hours, 3 hours. And sometimes they're really painful concepts. They're really painful things that we're talking about. Like, when you do this, I don't feel important. And almost all the time we're both kind of doing the same thing to make the other person not feel important, right? But every single time we have one of those conversations, we get closer. We get more connected. We clear the air, we clear the space around what's going on, and anytime you clear that space, what's underneath there, the love and the passion and the connection and the desire has room to breathe again. So every time we clear the space by having these conversations and that irritation dissolves, we feel more connected. We feel more passion. We feel more, um, love. I mean, we just feel better. We just feel way more connected. So that's the way to create more connections or more connectedness, is to be willing to have those conversations that might feel like you risk disconnect. Now, this piece right here is so gigantic, and this is an hour call on itself, but there are two styles of conversation, and one style is literal and the other style is implied. And again, this is just an awareness piece. You just have to know that some people will say something and that's all they mean. They don't mean anything other than the words that come out of their mouth, because they are literal communicators. And other people are implied communicators. They say something and expect something else. It's like they say certain words, but they imply something else. They imply a different message, right? And the easiest example I think to really get this is, if a literal communicator is thirsty and wants the partner to get them a drink of water, they'll say, "I'm really thirsty, would you get me a drink of water, please? Would you get me a glass of water?" Very clean, very literal. The implied communicator will quite often say, "Man, I sure am thirsty." And that's it, period. And they expect the other person to go get them water, because what they implied is, "Will you solve my thirst?" Right? Now, I'm not saying either one is better than the other. Not one of them's not right and the other's not wrong. It's just that's the way it is. We just tend to have two different styles of communication. And again, this is one of those areas where my experience is that most people in a relationship marry the opposite kind of communicator. Just most of the time, not all the time. But just have awareness on that. And finally, the H is to honor your happiness. And that's your individual happiness and also your happiness in the relationship. Listen, you got with this person for a reason. There was a spark at some point in time, no matter how distant that feels now. There was a spark, and there was a reason that this relationship made you happy. It's important for you to honor that. And it's also important for you to honor your own individual happiness. If happiness is more important than almost everything else, life gets so much easier. Relationships get so much easier. One of the reasons that Sybil and I have never argued is that we've never found anything that's more important than our happiness. Whether it's like a philosophical thing, some kind of moral disagreement because she grew up one way and I grew up another way, or whether it is a way to raise our kids, or whatever it is. We've never found anything that's more important than our happiness. Now, if the day comes that I do find something that I am willing to fight more for than my happiness with Sybil, I'm sure I will create an argument, because this is more important than my happiness. But I haven't found that yet. And after 18 years, I think just about everything has come up. So until that happens, we won't argue. Like, what's the point? What's the point to sacrifice your happiness in order to be right, in order to win? And so often these arguments are about winning. So a question that I think is so powerful, many of you have heard this before, but a lot of us don't use it, is, would you rather be right or would you rather be happy? Whichever one you are more committed to will probably dictate your happiness in relationships. If you're more committed to being right, whether it's about being right about your beliefs about how the world works or what people should do, or that men are all pigs and liars, or that women can't be trusted, or whatever, if you're more committed to being right about your beliefs, you won't have happy relationships. Because at some point in time, a happy relationship will challenge something that you believe in. And then you got to choose. And what most people are doing is they're unconsciously choosing their ego and being right over their happiness. And in my opinion, there's just not very many things that are more important than happiness. I mean, what's the point, you know? Many of you know my story. I almost died when I was 13 years old, and I've lived my whole life realizing that I can go at any second. I have no idea when my last breath is going to be. And my parents have both died in the last 2.5 years. And so it brought me face to face with my mortality again in watching my parents die and the decisions that they made that led to some of the health issues and all that kind of stuff. It's like, you know what? I don't know how long I have. Here's a question that I ask a lot in my seminars. If you only had 7 days to live, if you knew that 7 days from now you would die, how would you live your life differently? And what the responses are that I usually get are, I would bury the hatchet with my mom. I would call my sister. I would go take that trip that I've been putting off for so long. I would spend time with my kids. I would ask my dad to tell me stories about the war. I would, ask my mom what she used to do when she was young. I would ask them for their advice. I would write a book. I would do all these things. None of them are I would go make more money or I would do all the stuff that, that people are stressed out about now. They're always like these fulfillment things that people would do. And so my question always is then two things. Number one, if that's the way you would live the rest of your life, if your life only had 7 days to live, why don't we live the rest of our life that way, even if our life has 70 years to live? If that's how we would live a rich 7 days, then why don't we decide to live a rich 7 years or 7 decades that way? If that's what would make us truly happy, then why don't we get on it? And then my other question is, how do we know that we even have 7 days? So let's get really busy being happy. And if that's more important to you, watch how your arguments dissolve. It's almost impossible for two people who are committed to happiness to argue. It's just impossible. You just can't do that. So would you rather be right or would you rather be happy? And then the last piece here is just to pre-decide that every single day will be full of joy. That is a decision. Joy is a decision. It's not a reaction. Although most people live like it's a reaction. They need things to happen in their life for them to be joyful. They need there to be no traffic. They need a parking space to be open up in the parking lot. But you can pre-decide that every day will be full of joy. When my dad got diagnosed with cancer, I pre-decided that these last days, however long it's going to be, it will be beautiful. And because I pre-decided that it would be beautiful, it was, because that's what I looked for. So pre-decide that every day will be full of joy and commit to the joyfulness in every day first, and then deal with whatever comes up from a pure joy perspective. So hopefully, these tips and concepts have been helpful, and I guarantee you that when you do this, you've got a much better chance to live your life like Mickey Mouse. You know? I mean, what if, I can't look at that picture without smiling. You probably just heard me smile. I mean, what if that right there was our highest priority? That right there. Having that level of joy, a mouth opening smile, a smile that has so much richness and energy in it, you can't even keep your lips together. That kind of joy. What if that was our highest priority? And what if we sought relationships out that would amplify that instead of expect our relationships to create that for us? What if we sought out partners and we gave this to them instead of doing the taking? What if we did more of the giving, right? How would life be different? I mean, how many things that we're pretending are big deals in our life would just go away because they're actually just not that big of a deal? That's what I want. That's what I wish for each and every one of us, for each and every one of you. And I guarantee you, for those of you that have kids or that you're going to have kids, they get that. They feel that. And they are watching the show a lot more than they are listening to the lecture. You can do a lot more to empower your kids and teach them what a relationship should be like by showing them what a relationship should be like, rather than tolerating an unfulfilling relationship and then telling them that they deserve more in their life. How are they going to know what more even looks like if you don't show them? So I believe every single one of our relationships can be amplified right now. If you decide that it's a broken relationship, then that's your decision. But this is more about living a happy, a truly joyful life and bringing that into your relationships, not expecting your relationships to create the joy in your life, because you are not broken, you are not incomplete, and you don't need anybody else to complete you. This is who you are. You're happy. This is how you were created to live and experience this life. And we've all had things happen to us that are painful. But that doesn't mean we can't still live in joy despite the things that have happened to us. So your joy should not be conditional upon your outside circumstances. Your joy should be non negotiable. It's a pre decision that you have. Live your life like Mickey Mouse. Just watch how much easier relationships are. So that's what I got. I've got a couple comments or questions here. Um, look forward to the recording. Yeah, I'll send a recording out on this. Here's a question. How do you handle someone who feels that he's only happy if he's right? Well, send them the recording. Send them this recording. Who knows? Maybe it'll help to hear a man talk about this stuff, which I do consider myself. um, you know what? Honestly, sometimes you can't affect that change for somebody. You can hold the space for them to make that change, but sometimes you're not responsible for making that change. So maybe that's a conversation that you have. Maybe you realize that you were pretending that you needed to be right before you were happy. So I would say that most of the time, well, let me finish that thought. If you used to be, you used to need to be right before you were happy, maybe you just share with him that once you decided that it was more important to be happy than to be right, things change in your life. Or maybe in the middle of a discussion, you just turn the other cheek. And that doesn't mean walk away or step down. You can still, here's the thing, it takes two people to argue. I've believed that from the earliest days I can ever remember. I've always challenged. I've had a standing challenge. When I was in high school, I had a standing challenge. I give $100 to anybody who can make me argue with them. And they would tell me things, and they would call my mom names, and they would say blah blah blah. But they can't make me argue with them because an argument requires two participants. So it's impossible to get lured into an argument. It's only possible to choose and opt into an argument. You never have to argue with anybody. I don't care what they say, what they do. Your argument is your choice. And so I would suggest you model the fact that it's more important to be happy than right, because if you don't get into the who's right conversation, he has nobody to argue with. I don't think he'll just go into go into the corner and argue with himself about who's right or who's wrong. So when you withdraw your part in the debate kind of falls down. And that doesn't mean that this is going to be a shift that happens immediately, although it might. But that's what I would do. Live that way instead of expecting him to get that way. Right? All right. So that's the. Let's see. Okay. I just got another question. Yes. Works like a charm. You're absolutely right, Lisa. It does. So if any of you have any other questions that I can address, I certainly will address them. And type in your question in the question box, and it shows up for me. And if you have any feedback on any of this content that you think could be explained better, or you think there were any holes, any loose ends that I didn't tie up, I would love to hear your experience of the content. What really worked for you? What would have worked better for you? I would appreciate it if you just share some of that with me. Um, and I'm unoffendable when it comes to your feedback. So please, don't withhold anything because you think it'll hurt my feelings, because I'm in charge of my feelings, not you. But I really appreciate you showing up. I appreciate you having the energy, the attention. I appreciate those of you that threw some questions out there in comments. I appreciate all of that. And hopefully there was something of value that you can take out of this presentation and take it into your relationships as well. And please let me know how it goes. I love to hear some of the outcomes of the decisions that you made. Maybe you chose to be right, or sorry, maybe you chose to be happy instead of right, and it avoided a big upset, or it led to a conversation with your kids about the difference between right and wrong, and what is right and wrong, and what happens if you start committing to happy instead of right, and what kind of conversation did that turn into for your kids. So please keep me posted, send an email, and with your feedback, what I would love for you to do is to send an email to me and I'm going to send this to everybody in your chat window here in a moment. Send an email to Sean at coachshansmith.com. So if you have your chat window open, it should have showed up. Sean at coachshansmith.com. Or if you just want to message me on Facebook or however you can get a hold of me, I'm pretty available. Please send me your feedback. I would really, truly appreciate it. So with that, everybody, I wish you the best, joyful, happy-filled rest of the day. And I'm here to help in any way that I possibly can. And hopefully you can, this can fulfill you on some level in your relationships, in your internal life, or your individual life rather. So with that, I'm gonna sign off for here, and I'll talk to you all real soon. Take care, everybody.